Gabe, it is Thanksgiving week in the United States, and there's a lot I'm thankful for this year. But to kick things off, of course, I'm thankful for the podcast here, Gabe, and you as my co-host. Even though there's been a few episodes this year where I think we've almost replaced each other, but I keep coming back to my co-host, Gabe.
Yeah, indeed. I know you had a episode with Christina last week. That was awesome, talking about Wicked, which I had absolutely nothing to contribute to that conversation. It was a great episode. I'm really glad you guys did it. I did tell you it was like listening to a foreign language though, because I have not seen either of those movies and I had no idea what was going on. I was very confused.
I've seen Wicked for Good twice now. Went to it in theaters again last night, and it was a great experience both times, Gabe. So I highly recommend you go check that one out.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm probably not going to go do that, but I
Yeah,
am still
I didn't get the
thankful for
vibe.
you. No, it's probably not going to happen for me, but I'm thankful for you too, buddy. I'm really thankful for all of the things that we've had in the podcast this year. It's been so much fun, and definitely thankful to be able to have these conversations with you. I do have to call you out though for something, because, Zach, you and I we have a lot of things that we agree on. We have a lot of things that we disagree on. And sometimes your takes are just generally terrible. And this is one where I feel like you've got a really generally terrible take, which, not to call Zach out, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Zach hates Thanksgiving food. And I believe haven't you talked about how you'd rather just like eat a lasagna than eat Thanksgiving food?
I think my exact phrase. Okay, my exact phrase. I was being a little bit dramatic, but I feel like there's some truth in this. But I think I said I'd rather go to McDonald's than to eat turkey.
Oh, God, that hurts.
Gabe, just okay. There's some foods I love bread. I'm a walking carb, so I love bread. The mashed potatoes and the funeral potatoes. That's my favorite. But man, turkey and stuffing and crab. You know what? There's a reason we only eat it once a year, and I'm so happy we're having this conversation after connections here, because all that audience growth we saw, we probably just lost on that, or maybe people agree with me here.
Maybe they do. Maybe they agree with your terrible take, but I think Thanksgiving food is delightful. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. It's the best because it's just all about hanging out, eating food. I get multiple meals in the same day because my parents and my in-laws both live in kind of a similar vicinity. So I go to my parents earlier in the day and I eat in the afternoon a full meal. And then I go to my in-laws and I eat another full meal at the end of the day. And I'm happy. Although, as I've gotten older, I cannot mow it down as much as I used to, but I'm still doing my best and trying to cram as much food in me as I possibly can.
I'm cracking up with mow it down. That's the funniest thing I heard all day. I do have to say there's one thing I really like about Thanksgiving, and it's going to YouTube and watching people just like straight dropping a frozen turkey into a hot thing of oil and watching that explode. So safety tip for everyone, maybe don't be that person on YouTube. You can actually turn off the propane as you lower your turkey slowly into the deep fryer if you fry your turkey. But Gabe, how do you cook your turkey?
Barbecue. It's California, right? So, the weather's generally nice and we can cook it outside, and then that frees up the oven for all of the other things that you need to cook, like the stuffing and the sweet potatoes and all the other stuff that you don't like.
Yeah, it's Thanksgiving. Anyway, now that we've lost half our audience here, Gabe, let's talk about a recent marketing campaign, and that's going to be kind of the focus of the podcast here today. Is last week I got an email from Rivian of all companies, and it was a very short and simple email. But when you click the call to action or the call to outcome in that email, it took you to this landing page. And Gabe, I sent you that email because I thought this is just such a great piece of marketing. We had to talk about it.
Yeah, it was a great email, and the landing page was even better. And I know we're going to get into some of those details today, Zach, but it is something that really impressed me in how they're thinking about the approach that they take to marketing, the way that they're marketing to their customers, the just complete antithesis of what they're doing in comparison to most car companies that we see out there. It was really impressive. So I'm excited to get into it today and talk a little bit about how we see broadband service providers being able to take some of these ideas and put it to action in their own business.
Yeah, so let's deconstruct this a little bit. The theme here of the email was happy trails, and we'll get into what this all included here. But like we said, it started out as an email in a crowded inbox, and this time of year you get a lot of subject lines, right? End of year sales, 0% financing, things like that. But this one stood out. It was quiet, it was confident, and if we're being honest, it leveraged curiosity and utility. It brought me into the email, and then, like I said, it was short, simple, and immediately took me to that landing page as well. And what this email was is it was a comprehensive guidebook for off-roading in the Rockies. Gabe, have you ever done any like off-roading in a vehicle or kind of anything in the mountains like that?
Not off-roading in the mountains, no. Sounds like it honestly sounds like a blast, but I got a buddy who's
And
got a pretty nice Tacoma that can go off-road pretty legit, but I have not gone with him, but it sounds fun.
I love talking about Tacoma as well, Toyota as well, but man, the TRD Pro Tacomas. But that's for another podcast episode. But this guide here it is talking to us about off roading, telling us what trails to do, how to inflate or deflate your tires depending on the terrain, where to charge, of course, as an electric vehicle. But this whole email, this landing page, guided you from being this passive reader to an active dreamer, right? You're seeing yourself in one of these vehicles. And ultimately the goal of Rivian here was to get you into that demo drive. So the conversion here was not just to get you into the landing page, but to have you click on that demo drive and get you in the seat behind the wheel of one of these vehicles. In the auto industry, this is the highest value conversion. And Gabe, I've said this to you so many times now, but I said the number one reason I refuse to do a demo drive of an R1T or an R1S is because I know I'm leaving there, with X amount of dollars less and in a new vehicle. So that
Oh
was kind
yeah.
of the big goal of vehicle here today, or of the email campaign. And the last thing I want to talk about as we start to jump into some of the best practices within this campaign is just another thing from the Rivian website. I mentioned the demo drive. We've talked about that before. A lot of these legacy automakers. I went to two just before this podcast, and there was no demo drive or test drive or anything on their website, any call to action on their website to get me in the
Well,
seat
no,
of their
that's not
car.
true. There was a crappy call to action on their website,
Oh, there
Zach. You told
there
me
was
that
a
what it
there was a
you
learn
asked
more
me what it
button.
was, and I was like, please tell me that it's learn more. And
Yep,
sure enough, it was.
sure it was. But again, like that button means I don't know what was even behind that button. I can tell you what's behind a demo drive button. But the last point here, as we just talk about the experience overall of this company, is what they call their dealership. So on these legacy auto websites, it helped me locate a dealer, found the closest dealership to me, all that legacy gross language. On the Rivian website, of course, it talks about their spaces, Rivian spaces, and it's their own shift from that traditional dealership model to a more casual, experiential environment. And I think the key here is the experience, everything from this email to the landing page to if I was to walk down the street and walk into a Rivian space right now is all focused on the experience. So with that background, Gabe, let's talk a little bit about the shift from the transactional commerce to relational commerce,
I'll
right?
go back to something just really quick that you mentioned, which is this all started with an email. And this is something that you and I talked about when you got the email was our inboxes are so crowded. And it seems almost wild that we're talking about how effective an email campaign was with the thousands of emails that we get in our inboxes every single day. But that's how good this was because it was so different than what you talked about before. It wasn't an end of year sale. It wasn't a 0% APR email. It wasn't anything that was it wasn't salesy. It was educational and informative. And that's what allowed it to break through in this unique way. And that's the part, as we get a little bit further into the conversation, that I think broadband service providers can take away. You and I have this conversation about email marketing all the time, Zach. Like, it is a challenging environment to be in for sure. Like, it is difficult to break through, but if you have that way to contact your customers or prospects and you're able to do it in a way that's creative and interesting and unique, it is still a super effective way to market to folks and help educate them about the product that you're trying to sell.
I was really hoping you'd use the phrase "mow down" in there, like talking about how Rivian's, sending this email to mow down a crowded inbox. But you're spot on, Gabe. So as we talk about relational commerce here, traditionally marketing's in this utility framework, right, where the value is defined by the ease of obtaining said asset, right? So if we're talking about buying a car, the value there is, of course, is buying that car. Broadband, a little bit of a different experience here, but typically when you buy something, again, in this case, an example of a car, even broadband service, if we want to take that, you ask the question of, if I buy this, what do I become? Who will I become if I own this product? And Gabe, we were just talking before the podcast about some other companies we see this in as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great way to frame it up, Zach, of, again, who will I become if I buy this product? It's the same thing. People don't buy shoes, they're buying being more fit, or same thing. We're getting towards the end of the year, and on January, people are going to sign up for gym memberships, and they're not buying a gym membership, they're buying a healthier lifestyle. So it's, what ultimately is it that you're trying to sell to that consumer? It's that change, it's that outcome that they're looking to drive in their lives. Or I said drive, I didn't even mean to, like, no pun intended. But in the case of a Rivian, being able to be somebody who's conscious about the environment, who is interested in being in the outdoors, and those are all of the things that Rivian was leaning into with that email. They even talked about it in the both in the email, I think, and on the landing page, of making sure to lean into the environmental aspect of it. Make sure that you're not driving off the roads. Make sure that you're leaving the environment the way that you found it. Those sorts of things, which I thought was a really smart way to kind of tie these things together as well.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing with this campaign too is I don't know, on my end who they sent this to, right? I live in the Rockies, so did they just send it to people in the Rockies? Did they send it whatever they did there? But I think that one of the things I like, of course, is how they use data to build this usable guide that reduces friction between learning about the product and actually buying the product. Now, I geek out. I watch Rivian videos and watch people who own these vehicles, and um, see what their experiences are. So I feel like I know more than the average consumer as well. But Gabe, I sent you that link. I don't know how much research you've done on Rivian, but um, did you think it reduced friction if you were to buy a Rivian?
Hugely reduced friction. And again, just like you said, it was clearly a targeted campaign where it's sending it to people who are in the specific area. It talked about very specific trails that you could go enjoy, right, and get out into nature, which is the whole point of what they're really trying to drive here. But I keep using this term, and I don't even mean to be, but it's so perfect for the conversation today. But yes, it again was just removing that friction of, like you said, getting in to do the demo drive. And you're so right about the demo drive being the highest conversion tactic. Like, the likelihood of anybody, or certainly you, but anybody going and driving that car for a day or whatever, a couple of days, and taking it back, very, very small percentage of those cars are coming back.
Yeah, and Gabe, I mean, I even think about the broadband industry as well here. So, what is our equivalent of the demo drive? Well, unfortunately, it might come after install, right? That opportunity to bring out your app, highlight its features, show people what you can do, and of course, you can do that prior to the sale as well. But again, that's your experience. That's where you can really highlight how you are different from your competition. I think
Mhm.
the parental controls come to mind here. The prioritization as well. The gaming experience, if you will. If you can highlight things that you can do that your competitors can't, and then continue, showcasing that experience throughout the customer journey, throughout the time of install. Again, there's so much value being added there as well. So yeah, in our industry, you might not be able to go out and test drive this great vehicle, but think about what your test drive might be. What does that
Well,
mean
you could
to you?
You could actually offer a test drive to people. You could offer a trial period for some period of time. And we have seen providers doing that as a way to remove the friction and the concern of moving, of switching their providers.
Mhm.
Is, hey, we'll give you a 30-day guarantee that if you don't love this at the end of 30 days, we're so confident in this awesome service that we're going to deliver to you, that you can leave us, no questions asked, no contracts, none of that, right? And I think that's a great way to potentially remove some of that friction. And it's not the perfect equivalent of a demo drive, but I think it's leaning into that aspect of removing an objection that people would have if they were deciding to move forward with a new provider.
Gabe, I think it was one of my professors in college. He talked about a demo drive. He was, expanding their family. They were looking for a bigger vehicle. And he did his research. He shows up and he's like, I, asked all the questions they didn't know, they didn't have answers to, but I knew the answers because I did the research online. And overall, it was just such a bad experience that I just, went and bought a car, somewhere else. And I mean, that same theory applies here. If you're going to do that free trial, that demo drive, if you will, you've got to make sure you have that exceptional customer experience. And I think a lot of BSPs, they strive for that. They want to have that as well. But if
Mhm.
there's any major hiccups there, again, it could very much change the perception of your brand.
For sure.
And speaking of the brand here, so we're going to talk a little bit about the traditional marketing approach versus this content led approach here as well. And I think the first one we'll talk about here is just the objective of your campaign, right? We want leads, right? So we have this objective for immediate lead capture. Whereas with Rivian, they didn't take me directly to a sign up form. They didn't take me directly to a button that says call us. Like, not to throw GM under the bus, but I think every single one of their websites had a phone number I could call. Who's clicking that button? But what Rivian did here is they have a campaign that's focused on brand education and lifestyle enablement. And one of the things, combined with everything we just talked about, I think they did a very good job at Gay that we really have to dive into a little bit deeper is one of the biggest barriers to entry when you're buying an EV, I think, is where am I going to charge this thing? Where am I going to fuel this thing up? And here Rivian has this off-road guide that says, hey, you can do all of this without worrying about charging, without sacrificing, or you can buy this vehicle without sacrificing your love for exploring the mountains and things like that. I think they did a very good job on a brand education, lifestyle enablement perspective there.
100%. It called out all of the charging stations that were within a specific radius of these trails that they were telling you to go out to. So it's just immediately hitting that objection and just knocking it down by addressing it straight away. I'm such a big fan of that, both in marketing and just sales. I've been in a number of sales conversations where we knew that there was going to be an objection from the customer. And in my view, it's so much better to just address that objection immediately or as early as you possibly can, because otherwise, the person sitting in that room with you or sitting on the call with you is going to be thinking about this the entire time. And even if you're going through your sales pitch of, oh, hey, this is why this product is going to be so great for you, if in the back of their mind, they've got this objection that's just gnawing at them, why not just take that right off the table straight away? And again, it can be done in a sales conversation where you're having a personal one-to-one, or in this case, they did a great job with this from a marketing perspective by just, again, taking that objection right off the table by educating you through that process.
I have to say it almost makes me miss my, Toyota 4Runner TRD, but, you know, that thing got 16 miles a gallon, so here we here we are. But I
Uh,
think the next thing here too is just the content focus, right? And this
mhm,
is where, again, if you're in the broadband industry, think about this a little bit deeper, right? We are traditionally trained to recognize specs, price, incentives. The technical specs just blow my mind. Gabe, I don't wanna go down that path on this podcast. We've done that many times here, but changing that in this case to the narratives, the guides, the user stories as well. I love bringing in the testimonials or hearing from others. What are they doing with this product?
mhm. Yep. Yeah, that's spot on. And I was thinking about this as we were getting ready for this podcast, Zach, and we talked about it briefly. But this whole idea of like what other companies are what other car companies are doing. You mentioned GMC, you mentioned Chevy, and them being really focused on the technical specs and things like that. The brand that really I think has done a good job of this for a long time is Jeep. And they have, in their commercials, have really leaned into the lifestyle component of what a Jeep entails. They've got the special wave. When you see somebody with a Jeep, you give them the Jeep wave. And they're really thoughtful about showing their products out in the world, being, going off-roading, doing all of these things that you want to do when you buy a Jeep, even if most people who buy a Jeep don't actually do those things.
I say
But point being,
most people who buy a Jeep just spend time in the maintenance shop. So
yeah, that may be so. I have never owned a Jeep, so I'm not going to disparage the Jeep organization of whether it's a good product or a bad product.
I
But
have no shame, and
you have owned one, so you can say this. But my point being is that their advertising and their marketing is really leaned into this, especially with their TV commercials. However, that's expensive. Most people do not have tens of millions of dollars to be running, TV commercials to build brand. And what I think is really interesting is that Rivian did this in a very cost effective way. They basically recreated a Jeep commercial in a digital format. And now they have this landing page that they've created as well that they're driving people back to. They're getting information about the people that are being driven back to that landing page. So they've kind of taken this traditional way that Jeep was doing it with these big TV commercials that cost millions of dollars and then tens of millions of dollars to promote nationally. And they've done it in a way that's much more cost effective, but probably gives them way more data and insight about the people who are engaging than the Jeep commercial ever did.
And this is a company who's surely very cognizant about their marketing spend as well. And
Mm-hmm.
the last one I want to talk about here, with this approach here, is just the traditional paid spokesperson. I think every auto brand's got a paid spokesperson. It's cringy in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm on my own there with my Thanksgiving food, but one of the things that Rivian did with this specific campaign is they called out one of my favorite YouTubers who's not really involved with Rivian at all. He bought a product. I don't believe he's sponsored by them. He bought their R1T. This is I'll call him out, Jerry Rig Everything. His name's Zach, but I always call him Jerry because that's his username. But Zach here in Utah, he's known for doing durability tests, and to bring in someone like him who's using this truck, he's beating it up. I think one of the things he always says is something about how if he's going to buy a truck, he's going to do truck things with it, right? So, excluding all of that, they brought in either some of his feedback or maybe a YouTube video into this email campaign as well, or this landing page. And I think it's just a great bridge to your average consumer who's going to be buying these products, or to make that bridge to someone who's also buying a truck. And another thing I like about this is, in the past, he's pretty vocal on Twitter with product feedback, things like that. And he's done it a few times. I think more so with like how much data you see on the display of the Rivian. Early on, he had tweeted at them and said, "Hey, I would love to see more data, more of this." Lately, he's been talking about the 12-volt battery replacements. Gave a similar scenario you were in, asking,
Yep.
"Why can't I just do this myself?" And
Yep.
I can't remember the exact executive at Rivian, whether someone in product or someone in engineering. They reached out, they responded, and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna fix this, make this right." But I love that you have this brand, influencer out in the wild here, who's again using the product, talking about how that product has improved their lives, and then as he shares his feedback, Rivian's taking that to enhance their own products as well. So there's that whole feedback loop, rounding this out as well.
Virtuous cycle, man. That feedback coming back to the organization and then making the product better. And I think that's something any business can learn from, is, listening to those folks that are actually out there using the product and making sure that you're building things that, that really make sense for, for the consumer. But then you brought up that point that's so spot on. Just adding that validity to what you're actually sending out by aligning it around something and someone that people listen to. And there are influencers in every aspect of the community. We, in the broadband service provider space, we see this a lot with like the people who are really into technology, or the gamers in the community, those who are going to have some influence over, how people feel about the broadband service provider because of where they're at from a technology perspective. And we shouldn't shy away from that. We should be leaning into it, because those can be great advocates, provided that you're delivering an awesome service. But hey, let's have some confidence in the service that we're delivering, and make sure that we're, really shining a light on those stories that are coming back from those influential people in the community.
Absolutely. I love sharing my opinions and my feedback as noted by this podcast. But even at home with my internet connection, working from home, light gaming, podcast production, of course, I have so much, I'm not to put myself up there too highly, but I have so much valuable feedback to provide to this BSP that they could easily take and then use to market their products. Hey, are you working from home? Here's someone else who's working from home. Hey, you have a family? Here's someone else who has a family, and here's what they're doing. Yeah, we've seen
Yeah.
a lot of examples, specifically with like testimonials around that. But there's so much more people can do. Podcast episode for a different time. I want to round this part out by just talking about what that customer relationship is with someone like Rivian versus someone like GM, Chevy. We keep talking about like the worst of the worst car companies. GM's another one I'm just not a big fan of. Not to upset everyone we talk to on the podcast, but we've gone from this transactional relationship to relational. And Gabe, one of the things we talked about before this podcast, as well as when you do this, there's also kind of a difference between the price of the product, which then translates into the customer lifetime value. I know this is a metric you love. Do you want to geek out a little bit here?
Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I mentioned we should have been doing objections straight from the beginning. Maybe we should have mentioned this right from the top. But it, okay, our broadband service providers are not selling a $60,000 or $70,000 truck. So fair. I realize that Rivian has a very different marketing budget and a very different approach to this because they are selling large ticket items. But customer lifetime value is quite large in our industry. And I think can be even bigger if we're being thoughtful about the type of service that we're selling to customers. The Rivian is effectively a value-based offer. They're thinking about what is it that the person is actually going to do with this, and they're adding a tremendous amount of value around that, but then charging a premium for it. And that's something I absolutely know can be effective in this industry as well. And if you're getting a seven, eight, $9,000 lifetime value out of a customer, well, then you can be a bit more thoughtful about the marketing that you're spending up front, be a bit more creative with how you're approaching it, trying to be more thoughtful about, rather than just try to sell with email and targeted digital campaigns, maybe educate folks a bit more, because again, you have this longer term lifetime value. So you don't have to just hammer them over the head with discounts to try and get them to sign up and buy, like the large national, car companies are doing every time we see a commercial.
We started the podcast by talking about what Rivian is doing differently from these legacy automakers. I just love calling people like Jeep and GM legacy
Legacy.
automakers. But I think
Uh,
that's exactly what you should be doing in this space. If you're a broadband company, look at what you are doing differently, or maybe what your competition is doing differently. You've got to stand out. You've got to cut through the noise. We always talk about that as well. And again, what better way than to start by evaluating how you stack up against your competition today? How are you guys talking about the same product, maybe the same services even, and standing out? So
well, yeah, just to hit on that point again, I mean, let's say that we're getting all these emails in our inbox, right? And a lot of them are probably from, providers that want to sell us stuff. If those emails all say 300 meg for $39.99, and you're just seeing, 8 different versions of that flowing into your inbox, well, you're just going to ignore it all, right? Whereas if you do something that's different, you can actually break through that noise, just like Rivian did with the email that they sent to Zach. It stood out because it was so different, and it just brought a whole different approach versus the, hey, let's talk about technical specs and where you can get 0% APR financing.
And two things on that. Number one, it's the holiday season. How many emails are being sent out right now? A
So
lot. It's
many.
only going to ramp up. So if you're just another
Hmm.
email in the Black Friday inbox, that's not great. The second part of
Exactly.
this too is the listeners might be wondering, like, why are Zach and Gabe talking about these companies outside of the industry, right? Gabe and I do this on a daily basis, weekly basis, even, but we see these great examples. In this case, Rivian, and yeah, it's not the same product, it's not the same service. It has nothing to do with broadband for the most part, but it's an exceptional piece of marketing. And if you start to take that deeper thought, maybe you see a great email in your inbox or a great social media ad. Again, just thinking about that on a deeper level is great for marketing in 2025. I've been out of college for a few years. The ads that we talked about in college are long gone, Gabe. The ads from a year ago are long gone. So your marketing content has to be
Hmm.
continuously updated. Otherwise, like I said, it's just noise. If you're still talking about speed and price, great news, Gabe. What were they talking about in the 90s, early 2000s? Speed and
Sadly, I
price, I'm
remember
sure.
speed and price. Yeah,
So as we wrap
it's a
up
great
here,
point.
oh, go ahead, Gabe.
No, I was just gonna say it's such a great point, and when I, you and I love looking outside of the broadband industry for those best practices and for those ideas. And I think for anybody listening to the podcast, when you see a good ad that really resonates with you, regardless of whether it's in our industry or not, pause and really think about, well, why is this resonating with me so much? What
Hmm.
did they do well here? And to Zach's point, what can I take back to my day to day that will help me achieve the same sort of outcome that this company did with this particular piece of content. Maybe it's a social ad, maybe it's an email, maybe it's something that you saw on TV. And but it's, what are the things that worked really well here, and how can I bring that back to my day to day?
This is I mean, this is gonna sound like a hot take, but it's so true. Marketing is not logging into Canva, customizing a graphic, downloading it, and slapping it on Facebook. That's not marketing, right? We should do a whole episode on on what marketing is now. But I want to finish this episode off here by just talking about the psychology of conversion, right? So the ultimate goal for this entire campaign by Rivian was to convert a reader into a driver. Now, luckily in my case, I already got my reservation down. I've got my deposit down. I'm just in a waiting period. And Gabe, you know how patient I am. But
Not so much.
um, I love talking about consumer behavior as well. But there's this theory that talks about the mental stimulation or imagining oneself performing an action or being in that situation can really shape or form your consumer preferences here. So reading through this email, we're talking about off-roading in the Rockies. Again, the packing up your gear, all of this happening here lets you visualize yourself, visualize the experience. There's even in the landing page it talks about enabling rock crawl mode. My vehicle right now doesn't have rock crawl mode, but I saw myself there, turning on rock crawl mode, going up the mountain and everything. And now I'm just even more excited. Again, my reservation's there, my deposit's in, but if I didn't have that, I would be hovering my mouse right over that demo drive button because that mental test drive is complete and I'm ready to sit in one now, ready to take this thing out.
We should say there were some really nice quality pictures of the Rockies with the Rivian kind of in the Rockies on that web page. It
Can
was
I
on the landing page. They were quite nice.
I have to add one thing to this, and I'm going to pull it up on my phone right now. But Rivian just posted this today, and again, this is not to like juice up Rivian as a brand. I mean, I do love them, but I think I genuinely think they have some of the best design vehicles in the market. But that's my opinion. But even their post today was just photos shared by Rivian owners. So you can swipe through them, you can see the adventures that everyone's taking, and it's captioned. Gabe, we talked about this. It's the caption reads something, something, something. This serves as your daily reminder of our incredible community and how thankful we are for each and every. So again, the Thanksgiving message in there, the community content, and again, I'm swiping through all of these pictures. A lot of mountain pictures here. I gotta say that, Gabe. Actually, almost every single one is in the mountains. But again, just showing you how capable this product is. And at the end of the day, here, what we have is a gap analysis. And Gabe, I'm not talking about accounting right now, but
Oh, sad. Yeah,
I know
small letters gap, not big letter
one,
gap.
one fewer A's in here. But if you think about your current vehicle, you see these pictures, you think about your current vehicle. Can your current vehicle go on these adventures? Maybe you have an off-roader today, but you're thinking, nah, electric vehicles can't do that. This product can't do that. Well, guess what? Here is Rivian showing you the stories that include people who are. So it's building this desire to go out and buy that R1T, that R1S, bridging that gap between your current state and your aspirational self. Where do you want to be? Where are you today? And where do you want to be tomorrow? And Gabe, I really hope you have a Rivian in your garage here in the next few months.
I've told you before that my wife, you mentioned that you love the design of the Rivians. She thinks they are hideous and does not like the design of those at all. So I think I've made the joke to you before that if I ever brought a Rivian home, my wife would probably divorce me. I don't know that it's that extreme, but she would definitely not be
I
happy.
I'm not a huge fan of like the white light bar across the front. I love the
Mm.
headlights, like the oval headlights. The white light bar, I'm not a huge fan, but like I don't like the light bar in any car. So that one I could give her some, leeway on, but like the R1S, like the side profile or even the back, and I really
Okay.
hope there's like some car guys listening to this and ready for this opinion, but I think it looks a lot like the GX 550. If you put them like side by side or looked at the back of the Rivian R1S and the GX 550 here, that's Lexus, from the back, they're pretty similar looking vehicles. I don't know if like the Lexus is built for off-roading. I mean, you probably can, but again, it's more expensive vehicle, so careful where
Yeah.
you go. The Toyota, the Land Cruiser, maybe more so like let's take that off-roading. But again, there's your gap analysis, right? You have this equipped vehicle. Where do you want to go? And Gabe, that is all I will say about Rivian. I didn't talk enough about Wicked. We talked about that last week, so that's everything I had for you here, Gabe.
I mean, we infuriated people by talking about how Thanksgiving food is bad. At least you did, and then extolled our love for Rivian. But I mean, that's a good podcast today, man.
We lost a subscriber on the Thanksgiving food note. No,
Yeah,
it's the
just so
funny.
everybody knows, just because Zach doesn't like Thanksgiving food does not mean I don't like Thanksgiving food. There
The
is
best
one
part of this,
co-host here who likes Thanksgiving.
the best part of this is like there's somebody listening to this podcast right now and being like, you know what? I think he's right about Thanksgiving food. Like out of the thousands of listeners, there's somebody out there. But I digress.
There are dozens of you, man.
Tens and dozens of us in the country. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us on Buffering here today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. For more updates and insights, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.